All right. Hey guys. So I'm Paul from Contact Renovation and Custom Homes. This is the Art of Renovation Live. So every week I will be introducing someone from my network of trades or vendors, and we'll discuss all things pertaining to renovation, construction, design, and whatnot in general. This week we're going to be talking about landscaping. Then we're going to move on to living walls. So the landscape contractor I brought in today, his name is Alex Putnam from Terra Landscaping. I've known them for a few years now. They're part of my business club, and they do a fantastic job here. We've done a few projects together. We'll get a bit into the importance of landscape design, different options for materials, things to consider. It's a great time of year now to be planning your exterior renovation. We've all been locked up for a while, so I think it'd be nice to get out there and enjoy our yards if the weather ever cooperates. But so anyhow, Paul from Contact Renovation. This is Art of Renovation Live. I'm going to try and pull Alex in here. Oh, there he is. Bear with me for a second. All right. So give Alex a minute here to join the conversation. There you go. Hey, Alex.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, you're in sideways land today.
Oh, am I? Here, I can go like this. Yep.
There you go. Right on. All right, well, welcome. Thanks
Yeah,
for being
thank you.
my guest.
Yeah, no problem.
So we'll get we'll start off with landscape design and construction, and then we'll segue later on into living walls. So to start off with, I guess, I'll be scrolling through various images in the background here as we go. This is one of your projects I have in the background now with a combination of landscaping, hardscaping, a pergola, and whatnot. And I think that right there's a few things to consider within a design. And I think to start with, people should give some thought to the importance of a sound landscaping design before they really start doing any work. And I think on a smaller job, it may not be necessary to have an extensive design. But what would be, I guess, considered a worst case scenario could be one of those projects where you just start off going, oh, I need sod. Holy cow, let's get the backyard done with sod. And then as you're doing that, you realize, well, man, I should have put a sidewalk here. Where's that going to go? And then you decide you want to add a planter, and maybe you wouldn't mind a couple of trees for shade, or maybe
a fire pit,
or a fire pit, and all these things. Now you're kind of dealing with them in a reactive way without having pre-planned them. And what that does ultimately is really kind of cause some delays on construction, obviously, and it generates change orders, and you can end up having to redo some of the work that you'd planned. So I think it's important that people think about what they want in their yard first, and the best way to do that is to get through a landscaping plan or design. So why don't you talk us through the process of a landscaping design and what it entails, and then in the meantime I'll put up a couple of images in the background of some of the landscape designs you've done.
For sure. Well, when it comes to landscape design, it's kind of like the few things you touched on is about what do you want to do with your backyard? How do you want to use it? What's your intention with it? And through the design process, it allows the client or the people that we're going to be working with to have a better understanding of what they're going to be building, what they actually want. It allows them to actually figure out what they want to do with their yard as well. So that initial contact we have, it's a great opportunity for our project managers and our designers to meet on site and start building that relationship. From there, we assess their needs and wants, assessing the scope of work, and then we ultimately find out if we're going to be a good fit, or if like us working with the clients is the right fit. And having that process, that design process, is really the start of creating something beautiful. It's really the start of creating something that is going to be a space where you and your family can live in and enjoy for many years to come, potentially, depending on what your plan is.
Right. I look at landscape design, and I take kind of the same approach as I would with our our interior designs or our renovation designs that we come up with. And I think
Mhm.
I'm always a big believer of like, look, you need to decide what is going to be kind of the foundation or the basics of your design. So I always try to get our clients to go fall in love with something, whether it be a material, a
Yeah.
fixture, a concept, and then from there
Hmm.
we'll design the rest of the space around that so that
Yeah.
so they get what they ultimately want. And you want to make something that really stands out as, beautiful, but practical and functional. And I think in the landscape design, I think you need to consider, well, how are they going to use the space, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Totally.
people might not even realize some of the things to consider when going into your design, right? So sure, maybe you
Totally. Yeah.
want, whatever it might be, whether it's a large deck or hardscaping. Well, that's a lot of potential snow removal in the winter, right? Or
Potentially. Yeah.
potentially there's more maintenance required on that. Or maybe you had the idea that you wanted a pond in your yard. For example, when I bought my most current house, it came with a
Hmm.
pond, which at first were like, a pond, this is awesome, look how beautiful the pond is. Well, at that
Yeah.
point, my kids were 6 years old. Well, before we knew, my wife and I are freaking out because we think our kids are going to drown in this bloody pond.
Yeah.
And it's a mosquito pit because the pump was broken for a bit. And so in the end, we realized quickly, oh man, the pond, not a great fit for us, right? And so I think that's
Totally.
part of the process is someone thinking about what do they want in their yard,
Yeah.
and how do they want to use it, and for how long do they intend to. So I'll let you touch a bit on that and things to consider.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's when you're designing your space, the things that like we want to see from a client or hear from a client, we need them to tell us what they envision, how they envision using it. Do they like to host? Do they have a young family and they want a larger, greener space for them to have activities in, or do they need a playground, or do they want to have a combination of usable hosting space as well as like active space? And when they can give us this information, it allows us to bring in our expertise to then kind of design what they feel like they're wanting to get out of it. And then from there we can touch base. So like when it comes to key things to consider when you're wanting to design or plan out your backyard, you really have to think about how you're going to be using it. Do you want to enjoy your evenings around a fire pit and have cocktails, with the sound of a nice waterfall or a water feature in the background? Or do you have a young family and you need to be engaging with them by playing soccer or baseball or football, especially in this time of all the limitations we have going on when it comes to activities for our children coming up in the summer with COVID-19 and everything. Having a usable space in your backyard is going to be key to making sure your kids stay active and healthy. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and then other things to consider too is you need to think about the longevity of your project. And you need to think about like the retail or the resale of your house if it comes to that. Having a well designed and a well maintained landscape adds tons to the value of your house, and it also helps with the resale value. So there's a few key items to consider when thinking about landscape design and doing with your property, and there's also many more, but those come through the process of starting the design
Right.
and talking it through with the client.
Yes.
So
I mean, I have a few images of designs here, but they aren't showing up well in the background. I can't see a lot of the detail, but the landscape
right,
design ultimately will show you, how the space would be laid out, where you need certain things roughed in and infrastructure. For example, if you want irrigation, do you want
yeah,
lighting? Do you need drainage somewhere?
yeah,
And I think that's an important process there because people too often look at their yard and go, I want this and that, and not realizing, how
mm,
their choice might work when we get a heavy rainfall, right? Or
exactly,
maybe they don't realize they have a low spot in their yard or the drainage. And we've seen a few now projects that we've done where the neighbor goes and re-landscapes their yard, and they end up we get a torrential downpour and then it floods out our client's yard, and then we need to go
yeah,
deal with putting up, redoing some grading or drainage or retaining walls, things of that nature, right? So it's things to
yeah,
consider. um, and I guess the most important part is you don't want to get stuck later having to tear up your newly landscaped yard to
yeah,
address grading at that point. or, you know, maybe you decide later you want to retrofit and add in some landscaping irrigation. Well, that's pretty tough after, you know, you've just planted new grass or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, in regards to landscape irrigation, that's definitely one of the first things to go in. So it's in what we call like the utility layer. Goes down with your irrigation, your potential water management underneath there, as well as your landscape lighting and other types of conduit that you may need to run for your utilities. But you know, yeah, like that's what having a design does. A design allows you to layer up that project, and it shows you where things are going to work. It shows you where things aren't going to work, and it creates great transparency among what you're going to be getting the client and what we're going to be building and executing for you. You know, it allows people to visualize their space, and from there, you know, we do a lot of 2D, like bird's eye view designs. But depending on client needs, you know, we can enter into 3D rendering as well as doing even 3D modeling as well. So that allows the client to even step more into their backyard or into their project to have a better perspective of what they're going to be getting.
I'll show a couple images here of that. So here's a 3D modeling you did of a outdoor fireplace, it looks like.
Yeah, outdoor fireplace with little water features on either side.
Yeah, and then I think this is actually it once it's been finished.
Yeah, that's it there. Like, so the modeling is just of like the culture stone work, not of the concrete. And then on either side, it's flanked by 2 water weirs. So.
Oh yeah. And that's what primarily to create this. You know, it's more of an audible sound than it is a visual feature.
It's both. So with the weirs, you know, you get a really beautiful sheer effect of water. You know, it's a smooth line. It comes out. And then it falls into a basin. And a lot of people really enjoy that sound of trickling water. They can find it to be relaxing, find it to be calming. So it's kind of a combination of both like audio, like what you can hear in your spaces, as well as what you can see. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think like one thing to consider too is like multi-use space, especially if you have a smaller yard. We run into this a lot with the smaller homes, so trying to really make, you know, multi-use basements or areas on the main floor. But in your yard, it's the same thing. And there's a good example here of there's a pergola you guys did, and you know, looks like a nice pergola with a privacy screen. When you flip it around and look inside, it's a barbecue area. They've got their hot tub in there as well.
Exactly.
So it becomes a really nice multi-use space, and it's something to consider. And again, I think a good landscape design will factor these into the plan as far as, well, what do they like to use? How do they use their space? Right?
Exactly. So like for example, with this one, you know, when you enter into that yard on the left-hand side with the privacy screen, and you come around and all of a sudden you see this big deck with an outdoor kitchen, hot tub, small dining area, and bar. You know, with the design, when you're standing out there, you look around and you see how you're going to be interacting. You know, if the outdoor kitchen's here, what are other people going to be seeing? What am I going to be looking at? You know, and in some cases, you know, the view from where you're going to be looking isn't always necessarily what you want to see, or maybe you don't want people seeing in on what you're doing if you're just hanging out all the time, right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Again, with the design, you know, that allows everybody to figure that out, right? So you're not second guessing or going back and having to redo stuff.
For sure. And I think one thing to note here, like I'm looking at what the neighbor would see. It's beautiful from the neighbor's side. I presume this is onto the side yard, right? And that's a nice thing to consider as well. Is, you know, I mean, you're putting up this fairly tall structure. How's your neighbor going to feel about it? I know my pergola, which I talked a bit about last week on this program. You know, I talked to my neighbor in advance first, and we talked a bit about how to finish the backside for them, and I offered to build, you know, various features on the backside to make it usable for them too. But they weren't interested. They didn't really care as long as it looked nice. But it's a good conversation to have with your neighbor, because you're way better off being, you know, friends with your neighbor than enemies. And if you don't consider their needs during your design process, then
totally,
maybe you block their sun or their view or whatever it might be, right? So
well, like you bring up a great point about, it's not just about what you're building in your backyard, right? It's what other people are going to perceive in your space as well, right? And you need to consider all those elements. You need to consider who's going to be looking at it. You know, is it going to be something that's going to be an eyesore for someone, or is it going to be something that goes, hey, look, come check this out, what my neighbor did in their backyard. This is amazing. You know, like that's, you know, you have to consider all those factors, right? And that's something we do. We do focus on that, and it's important to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'd like to open up the floor, so to speak, for questions. I can't figure out this question function. I see a little tab here, and it says questions will be posted at the bottom, but I don't see any here. So if anyone's got a question, fire away, and then Alex and I can surely answer them for you. And then we'll continue on our conversation here in a bit. But in the meantime, I'll tell you kind of a worst case scenario. A good friend of mine has a property here in beautiful little backyard. Well, they did an infill project next door, and they ended up having a 3-story structure built right beside them with just concrete wall for 30 feet tall, and they lost their view, and all you see is this horrible concrete wall. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, what do you do at that point? It was, the city approved it. I mean, it would have been nice if you considered the look on how it was going to appear to them living next door, whether they put something on it to finish it a bit more attractively. But anyhow, one of those things to consider. Yeah. So
it is.
I don't see any questions.
And that's a tough one. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Fire away.
That's it. It's a tough one when you're, especially if you're dealing with infill. My wife, she's worked in infill for years, and when you're battling home density or increased, urban density, houses are going to get closer together, right? So it's a tough one to work with, but I mean, at the same time, that's the job. That's our job, and we have to make it beautiful. We have to make it work, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll move on and talk a little bit about permitting, right? Because I talked to John Yuzwenko from Sustain last week about decks and pergolas, and I mean, there's something the city requires permitting when it comes to decks, for example, or anything attached to your home. So last summer, you and I did a job together where initially the client wanted a deck built off the back of his house, and he lives in a skinny and had not a very big backyard. And we looked at doing a deck for him, and in the end, it turned out that the permitting that would be required was extensive, and the size of the deck resulted in too much lot coverage. So in the end, he would have to apply for a variance. So here's an image of it here. So what we did basically is, I guess you can see here, there's the balcony there in the background. I'll flip the angle. Then there's the garage, not, about 20 feet from the house. So small yard. Yeah. But the deck ended up being a bit cost prohibitive. And then also the permit process would have been a real hassle. So we switched it to hardscaping, and in the end, this saved them a whole bunch of money and time. But we got something beautiful still that in the end works how we wanted it to work. So I think there's an important something to consider there, as far as you may think you want a deck, maybe hardscaping is the way to go. So in this case, we went with, well, I guess you can explain it, but it's paving stones, and you can talk a bit about the process and what we did here and things to consider. Yeah.
Well, this job is this one was a really great job. This was in one of my old neighborhoods there that I used to live in, and I love that neighborhood. This one really made Bonnie Doon, Bonnie Doon, and this one we used a really great, like Paul was saying, it's like a modern infill skinny home, so it has some more linear modern effects to it, touches to it. We went with a Deco block product called the Terra slab on this one, and it is a really slick, really clean product. The shoulders on the stones are finished nice and clean, so you get really crisp, clean lines, and it lays down really nice. And it's good for like large, medium to large size, even small size patios, but typically medium to large size patios. And this is what we would call like a medium-sized outdoor patio with like a fire feature and stuff. And this one worked really well because we were able to fill up that whole space in there quite effectively with a small perimeter of some mulch and plant material. And it allows, great thing about like the hardscaping, you can come and you can step down from your deck onto a different type of material, right? So you're not carrying the wood to the wood. You're kind of creating two different concepts where you come from your deck down onto a more of a ground level, more of a stone or hard level. And that's a good thing to consider too, is the dynamic you're going to be creating in your yard, right? Between your different types of materials you're using. In this case, we didn't need to do any permitting on this job. The gas line that was put in by Contact Renovation, so that was out of our scope. Typically when that happens,
we handled the permit on that one.
Yeah. But for this part of it, for the hardscaping part of it, it's not attached to your house, so you don't technically need a permit to go down that route.
Right.
And it gives them the same usable space with one less of a kind of a hassle with the permitting side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of creates a combination of layers and material in your yard.
Absolutely. And like a few things we did on our end just to help, like, you know, the stairs, we kept them relatively simple construction grade stairs, but we just kind of, you know, classed them up a little bit with some wood spindle railings. And we did a little feature on the deck skirting to kind of enclose it all and make it look modern, tie into the colorways of the home. And then in the end, we used black mulch around the outside of the paving stones as well. And yeah, so in this one, like, it's a smaller project. So here you don't really need a big detailed landscaping design.
Right.
But you do want to do a sketch and kind of map out, you know, the layout for it. Because, like, we had to rough in a gas line for the fire pit. So we needed to know exactly where that pit was going to sit. So we found out the size of the furniture in advance. And I took into consideration, well, where's the couch going to sit versus the end of the paving stones? And then what kind of clearance do you want between the couch and the fire pit? So you do a fair bit of, you know, design and, you know, forethought, I guess, gets put into all the roughing. I had a question here from Braden about, so how is maintenance for this type of landscaping design? So I guess, Braden, I'll have to interpret this here. And as far as the product you're referring to, so what do you think, Alex? Is there much ongoing maintenance required for the paving stone and the mulch?
So with this project here, it's definitely what we would consider a low maintenance project. With the black mulch and mulch products, with the correct layers and thickness, you're going to suppress all those weeds, or a lot of weeds. Especially if you're using fabric, you're going to suppress them all. Typically, we don't always use fabric in the mulch. It depends on what you're doing with it. If you're growing a lot of plant material, you kind of want to avoid fabric and allow that natural decomposition of layers to build up nutrients into your planting beds. But for this type of project, the only real maintenance they're going to have is clearing snow from it if they want to use it in the winter. And then they have a small patch of grass, as you can see if you're looking down there on the left side of their deck. So you can see there on the left side there. So you're going to have to mow that and cut that as well. But when it comes to the maintenance of it, basically clearing it in the winter if you want to use it, and then over the course of years, you know, like a properly hardscaped patio, something that we stand by on all of our work, you know, is going to last you years to come, right? You know, if you do your proper pre-base construction, you do your base construction, you get your tamping and your compaction done right, you know, you'll have a patio that'll last you many, many years. And when you're working with a stone product compared to like a natural product, you know, you're going to have a lot more longevity out of that product compared to, like, let's say, like a cedar or spruce or pine deck.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to treat them and stuff like that. So maintenance, you know, it can be pretty minimal. It is pretty minimal. You're not doing a whole lot of maintenance to a hardscape patio once it's been put in place, especially if it's been done correctly.
Let's talk a bit about the different options out there for materials. So with paving stones, I know we have Eco Block, there's Belgard, and you have something more traditional like Allen Block. So some of them, I guess now there's a new product out there that's permeable, right? So you can get drainage through the actual stone itself, which can be great, which allows us to do some hardscaping where perhaps you couldn't before because of water table heights or things like that. So you want to maybe talk a bit about that and explain the benefits of it and what you can consider.
For sure. Well, like, permeable hardscape products out there right now they're really a pretty big game changer in the last like 2 to 3 years. It allows you to create patios that are more level. You don't need to put such of a slope or a grade on it. It also allows you to put patios in places where necessarily you might not want or could be able to put them. And then they work really well in large applications as well if you have potential water issues or water flows. Like if you're doing a driveway, having a permeable option for a driveway is a great option because you never have water running down. If it rains a lot, the water just seeps right in, and then you disperse it under with your proper water management plan underneath there, and there you go, right? So permeable option is really great because it just gives you more versatility on where you can put your product. Permeable is a little bit more expensive just because of they currently construct or cast less of it right now, and also too, just some of the materials they use to make it permeable, the binders, they have less of the smaller aggregate in their stones and in the joiner crack, that they have to put more binders in there to make it set and be more sturdy. But permeable is a great option, and we definitely like to use it when the application calls for it. So
So this
um,
image I just posted here in the background, Alex,
yeah,
what is the product there? It looks like larger concrete. Um,
yeah. So this is the Teco Block Borealis stone, and it's got a wood live finish to it. So it's a stamped piece of concrete, and then you lay it out, and you can do multiple different layout patterns on there. This one is what we call like a half and half pattern, and this one's good because it has that wood type of finish on it. So when this patio is completed, you have that kind of wood look to it, but it's stone,
yeah.
it's durable, it's not going to move, it's not going to shift. You don't need to stain it, you don't need to sand it, you don't need to do any of that stuff to it, right? And then in the middle there is the another stone from Teco Block, and that's the Antica paver, and it's a small set of stones, and they come in 5 or 6 different types of sizes, and you kind of use them as borders or as accent features in your project. And in the middle of this one here is actually going to be a fire pit. That's going to be the border, and it's going to be totally finished with the Borealis, as you can see in the picture Paul just swapped to.
Yeah.
So this picture here is a complete Teco Block. That's the Teco Block Borealis paver, the Teco Block Antica's paver stone, and that's the Brandon fire pit kit.
Gotcha.
So all by Teco Block. It's all beautiful. It's all modern. We love working with Teco Block product. The only downside, there's 2 downsides to Teco Block product. One is that they're out of Quebec. A lot of suppliers, and the only supplier actually in Alberta right now is Burnco. So they have a hard time stocking a lot of Teco Block material, which means that it turns into a lot of special orders for us. Special orders are not going to accept returns on. So let's say if we need 6 1/4 pallets of pavers, we have to order 7 full pallets. So there's a little bit of that. And I've been working with the Teco Block rep right now to figure out a better way to do that. And then secondly, because Teco Block makes such amazing product, you pay for what you get. It's definitely on the higher end of the products, but it's beautiful, it's great, it's well designed, it looks good. You can't get a better product out there, and anybody that goes with the Teco Block, they don't regret it. They really don't.
Yeah. Now you sound like a Teco Block sales rep. You should hit them up.
Well, it's just so good. It's so good. Any product we work with them is like, this looks great.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's always
they do a lot of work for us.
It's all about quality products, right? I mean, and those typically do cost more. I got a question here from Alyssa, and she's asking if there's any tips to make a yard more usable in the winter.
There is. It just kind of depends on what you want to do with your yard, right? Do you want to like make a snow fort in your backyard, or do you have kids, or do you still want to like, I know in like a lot of the Francophone and Nordic communities, they like to go outside and have, fires with tea, and do that kind of stuff. So when it comes to making it more usable in the winter, if you want to get out and use your backyard more, I think a great way to do that if you have kids is to potentially put in, some outdoor play structures that they can still use in the winter. If it's more for adults wanting to get out there and enjoy their backyard, having a fire pit, a wood burning or even a gas fire pit, with maybe some shelter around it that can assist with that. You can get your, or an ice castle. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one thing to consider would be, with us, with our winter days being so short, is really well planning your lighting in your backyard, right? As you do your landscaping, because that can really help to make it more usable. And, consider if you do put a pergola up. We talked about this last week with John. I built a pergola in my backyard, and it kind of evolved. I did exactly what I'm telling you not to do today. Is we had a design that kind of evolved along the way from what was going to be a deck to cover that pond we were worried about. And then eventually decided it was going to become a pergola. And when I did it, I didn't build it in a way that allowed me to put an actual roof on it, because I didn't have any slope built into it. So I think considering a covered space would be nice for winter use too. But anyhow, I think we're going to wrap up the segment on landscape design. If there's any more questions out there, I see John from Sustained Developments. He likes your hat. He's calling you the Indiana Jones of landscaping. All right.
I'll take that as a compliment for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so then we'll transition into the topic then of living walls.
Okay.
Give me a second here. I'm just going to get into some photos here to pull these up. I'm a huge fan of the living wall, and there's different types here, but what I'll do here,
Yeah.
I'll pull up one of these shots. Maybe not that one. Here's a monster of one. Anyhow, let's start. We'll wrap up then the segment on landscaping design and construction. So we'll transition now into the living walls. So I'll just basically reintroduce the show here. We're probably going to split this into two segments for reuse later. So I'm Paul from Contract Renovation and Custom Homes. This is the Art of Renovation Live. This week I have Alex Putnam here from Terra Landscaping. We're talking about living walls and the various options. And I mean, they're beautiful. We see that. I guess we should talk a bit about the options that are available to